I have a fantastic recipe for you today. It's what I call shepherd lives in a cottage pie. Now you may have heard of shepherd's pie. Now shepherd's pie is typically a layer of meat, some veggies maybe, especially mashed potatoes and cheese on top, okay? Now, shepherd's pie uses lamb. That is traditionally what is used in shepherd's pie. Cottage pie, however, uses ground beef. Now I know some people are still a little wary about the taste of lamb. They're not used to that in their daily diet. So I did a combination of the two. It's mostly going to have ground beef, but it's going to have a little bit of lamb, and I'll show you how to add that piece in just a moment. Now, this particular dish took quite a bit of prep to get ready for you today, so I'm just going to tell you what I've already had going on, okay? So the first thing I've done is I had some carrots, celery, and onion, and I diced those to approximately the same size. So that meant I had to break down the carrots to a small dice to match about the size of the diced onion and the diced celery. I put that in this pan over here that's been sauteing in a pat of butter and some extra virgin olive oil for a while now, until the onions have become translucent, carrots are beginning to get a little soft, but this is going to continue cooking throughout this dish for a while, so it doesn't have to be all the way completely cooked through. Last thing I need to add to that, I have 3 cloves of minced garlic that is going to go into the bowl. Set that to the side. Make sure I stir that around. And we will leave that to continue sauteing for a bit while I work on the meat layer of the shepherd lives in a cottage pie. Okay, so what I have in this bowl is 2 pounds of ground beef. I've got a pound of ground chuck and a pound of lean. That's just my own personal preference. I like having the chuck in there because of the fat content. Just adds a little bit more flavor, okay? The first thing I'm going to do with this is I am going to add a pretty hefty pinch of salt and black pepper into the bowl. Then I'm going to add a little bit, maybe a teaspoon of dried sage. Now there are going to be some fresh herbs that come into the mix a little bit later into the saute pan, but I want to add the dry herbs to the actual meat mixture. Next, I have some cumin, just because I like a little bit of smoky flavor with anything that has beef in it. It's about, I would say, a tablespoon of cumin. Then I'm going to put in just about 2 or 3 dashes of Worcestershire sauce. 2, 3. That's my version of a dash. Great. That's going to come back as well later on in the mixture in the pan. Now, I'm just going to take my hands, mix the dry herbs, salt, and pepper into the ground beef in the bowl. That also helps me start breaking it down from the packaging into smaller pieces before I add it into this pan over here. All right, my veggies are looking pretty good over here. Now, like I said, typically it's mainly just meat, mashed potatoes, and cheese. I am going to be hell-bent on making sure that there's some vegetables in this dish. So that's why I've got all these sauteing over here in the pan. To that mixture that's already sauteing in the pan, I'm going to add all the ground beef that we just added the herbs and the Worcestershire sauce to. Set that to the side. Wipe off my hands. Then I'm just going to break that down in with all the veggies. And let that go until it starts to brown. Okay, so there's the cottage, right? So I got to find the shepherd. Now, another thing about lamb is I think lamb is pretty expensive, especially here in the States. Ground lamb is so much more expensive than ground beef. That's why I'm using beef as the majority of the meat mixture for this dish. But I like to at least pay homage to the original shepherd's pie by adding a little bit of lamb to the mix. And the best way I've found to do that, rather than buying an entire other pound of ground lamb, which you could do and replace one of these pounds of beef with that, is I found that for about $5 I can get a lamb chop, a lamb shoulder chop from the grocery store. And as long as I sort of mince that up pretty finely after I take it off the bone, I find that it adds just the right amount of lamb flavor to the dish. And I also like that I add it towards the end because I don't think that lamb should be cooked as well done as you need to do your ground beef. When you have, lamb chops, you typically have those at about a medium rare, kind of like you would a steak. So by adding this small portion of lamb towards the end of the cooking process in the pan, you can actually do that, cook the lamb properly so that you get the right flavor, throwing the bone away that's in the center of the chop. Now you're going to find each one is a little bit different with fat content as well as bones. So that's all I'm doing right now is trimming away all the lamb meat off of all the bones that are in the chop. Once I've got all the bones out, then it's really just a matter of trimming away fat. You really don't want a lot of that. And then chopping down the lamb to where you want it size-wise. I want actually some decent chunks of lamb so that when you find them in the pie, it's kind of a surprise. It's like, oh, there's a different texture of meat and flavor all in one fell swoop. Ground beef over here is looking great, smelling great. Just keep chopping down your pieces of lamb while that is cooking away. You really do need a good knife for this, just to make sure that you get through all the fat that you really don't want in your dish. So you're really just left with really lean pieces of lamb. So you can see I'm tossing in my garbage bowl over there the pieces of fat that I don't really want or need in the dish. Getting there, folks. Big piece of fat to get rid of. There's plenty of fat in that ground chuck. There's no need to keep this, and I think that the fat of the lamb is actually harder to cook through, so we'll rely on the ground chuck to give us our fat content. All right, so you see I've got my little pile of lamb there. Let's give this a stir. Oh yeah, it's definitely browned on one side. So we'll let that keep on cooking. Now I've got the other side turned over. All right, so another piece of prep that I did beforehand, before I started cooking my veggies over here, another layer of flavor that I love to add to this dish is actually sauteed mushrooms. I took a package of baby portobello slices and then I chopped them about the same size as I chopped all the carrot, celery, and onion that are in here. And I sauteed those in just a little bit of butter and olive oil. And you can see that they're just a small batch of those mushrooms. Those also go into our mince mixture, so I'm going to go ahead and put that in to put that layer of flavor in as well. Toss those in. Now you notice I've got a pretty deep saute pan going. That's just because of how much is actually going in this pan, the veggies and all the meat, etc. Alrighty. So, still not ready for my lamb quite yet. I'm going to put another pinch of salt, another pinch of pepper in. Now, you want this meat mixture to be kind of this thick, luxurious, saucy layer in your shepherd in a cottage pie. So we need to do a couple of things. We need to deglaze the pan a little bit to give up all the bits that are on the bottom, but also we need something to kind of help thicken that sauce. So what you're going to do at this stage, once your ground beef mixture is pretty cooked through, for the most part, yeah, I think we're there, is I've got about 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. And I'm going to sprinkle that over this entire mixture. I may not use the entire 1/4 cup. I'm just going to see how much I need to kind of coat everything. Nope, I will need the entire thing. That is going to help us with the thickening process of the sauce that's going to develop around this mixture. Get that incorporated in, because you certainly don't want any raw flour. That does not taste good. All right, then I'm going to take some sherry cooking wine. And I'm only going to use maybe about 1/4 cup of sherry to help deglaze the bottom of the pan. I told you Worcestershire was going to come back to us again. Several dashes. That was probably a good 3 or 4, maybe 2 to 3 tablespoons. I eyeball my recipes so much it's hard for me to even think about what the measurements are for these. Great. Oh, yeah. Now we're talking. It's getting good. The last thing I'm going to add is a little bit of beef broth, okay? Just to, again, that was about 1/4 cup now. I'll see if I need more. To continue sort of helping that gravy to form. Get it all nice and saucy around our meat and veggie mince layer. All right. Next 2 things that are going in. I've got about, let's say, 1/2 tablespoon of tomato paste. An added layer of flavor. And then I am so proud to say that I actually finally have my own herb garden. I know in other videos I'm like, gosh, I wish I had an herb garden. I just don't have the yard. But I found this contraption actually that is a raised bed, but it's self-watering. It's actually really, really cool. That's allowing me to grow some herbs out on my tiny little patio in the back of my home. And so I've got oregano, rosemary, basil, sage, and thyme growing out there. And for this recipe, I needed fresh thyme and fresh rosemary, which I have chopped. And there's probably, I would say, maybe a tablespoon and a half of each, the fresh thyme and the fresh rosemary. That gets sprinkled in to the pool. Put those herbs in towards the end. Because they're fresh, they will cook pretty quickly. Get those nice, oh my gosh, this kitchen smells ridiculous. I mean, you know, we people in the South, we love our casseroles, and so this is my international casserole. Because it certainly didn't originate here in the South. But oh my gosh, I love this dish so much, and I think you will too. All right, that is starting to thicken up nicely. My mince is brown. All right, now, finally, it's time to put the shepherd into his cottage. So I'm gonna create a well in this pan to empty some space in the center of the pan. And I'm gonna take all those pieces of lamb that I chopped up and put them right in the center of that well. That's gonna enable me to kind of see how they are cooking. For one thing, a little bit of salt just over the lamb, a little bit of pepper, and a tiny bit of Worcestershire. And a tiny bit of the sherry. Great. So now, watch that lamb start to cook and brown until it gets to kind of a medium rare. And that is all there is to the minced meat mixture. This meat mixture is actually what I think is the most important part of the dish. It's where all the flavor lives, honestly. I'm literally going to use some leftover mashed potatoes that I had to layer the mashed potato layer on top of this, and some cheese, and then you're good to go for the most part. Lamb is cooking nicely. Come on, little guys. Maybe a little bit more flour, just to make sure that that also thickens now that I added more liquid. But I think we are going to be good to go. Yeah, and that quickly, honestly, there's a little bit of brown on the edges of all of those lamb pieces. And that's really all you want. You want to make sure that you've at least seared a little bit of brown on the edges. And then you can incorporate the lamb back into all of the meat mixture. All right, last thing that is going into this giant saute pan with all of this goodness. It's just a traditional element for shepherd's pie and cottage pie are peas. The Brits, they do love their English peas because they think they're called English. So anyway, I've got some frozen English peas, and those go in at the last minute. They're still frozen, and that's fine. They're gonna heat up and cook nicely once I put them into the hot pan. So I've probably got, I would say, a cup of frozen green peas into the pool. Tiny bit of salt on those, just to help break down the frozen ice on them. And then just stir them in. That's also gonna help them, because they're still frozen, maintain this beautiful bright green color into our mixture. It is so thick and saucy now. It's perfect. Alrighty, I'm gonna let this continue cooking for just a couple more minutes. I'm gonna clean my station and get ready to assemble. I'll be right back. Hi y'all, we are back. Everything is cooked and ready to assemble for my shepherd lives in a cottage pie. All right, so we worked really hard on making sure that this meat mixture has the most flavor it possibly can. And we also tried to pack some veggies in there, so it just wasn't a bunch of sauteed meat. But there's tons of flavor of herbs and garlic and veggies inside this meat mixture over here. And all we have to do is get a 9 by 13 dish, baking dish, take all of that mixture and put it in. Oh, yeah. That looks amazing. Ooh. Yes, all right. Set that to the side and then spread out to an even layer in your dish. I mean, it is so, I gotta show you this. This is so colorful. all the fresh carrots and the peas in there, and the gravy just looks like you want to sop it up with a biscuit. All right, so there is layer one. Now, I told you I wanted to make sure that I got lots of veggies in. There's lots of veggies in this mix, but I'm gonna add yet another layer, and it is the easiest thing to do ever. All I've done is drain and wash a can of mixed vegetables. So there's carrots and peas and corn and lima beans, and I think chunks of potato in there, and I just want to sprinkle that canned mixture all over. You can certainly leave this step out. It's not a necessity at all. I like the chunked potatoes that are in here. I think that's another layer of texture that this gives. And also, like I said, it just adds some more veggies, so that's always a good thing, right? All right, next layer. Shake that down, make sure everything's nice and even. I have some leftover mashed potatoes that may have some butter in them, I'm just saying, that I'm going to spread over the top. And this is kind of like frosting a cake. You just want to kind of put dollops everywhere. Pretty big, thick dollops of potatoes all over the meat mixture and the veggies. Then, from there, now that you've got these big dollops, you can take your spatula or whatever you've got and just spread those potatoes over to the edges. It's like putting a blanket over your baby you worked so hard on. Yeah, a little bit more right there. Perfect. Alrighty, that's the potato layer. Last layer, a little bit of cheese. First to these potatoes, just to season them a little bit. Put a little bit of black pepper, tiny bit of salt. There's already a lot of salt in the dish, it doesn't need a lot, but the pepper will help. All right, I've got just extra sharp shredded cheddar cheese, and I'm not gonna like cover like a blanket with cheese because the cheese is gonna release quite a bit of oil. So I really just want the flavor of cheese, not like a coating. Some people with their shepherd's pie, they don't even put cheese, but I like cheese, so I'm putting cheese. Just a light sprinkle, not total coverage over your potatoes. So you can still see the potatoes a little bit through the layer of cheese. Great. Now we are finished. Now I'm going to put this into a preheated between, I would say, 375 and 400 degree oven. Everything in this is cooked pretty much, except for that tiny layer of the canned vegetables, but even those are cooked before they put in the can. And then the cheese layer on top. So I would say you want to leave this in just so all the flavors meld for maybe 20 to 30 minutes, and that's really it. You want to make sure that the cheese is nice and bubbly on top. In fact, towards the end, you may want to turn on the broiler just to like brown that cheese a little bit, make it a little crusty. There's nothing wrong with that in my life. So I'm going to pop this in the oven, and when it is done, I will show you the end product. I'm so excited. I can't wait. I hope you're excited too. Hi y'all, it's Bradley the Singing Chef, and we are back. So the magic has happened. This shepherd in a cottage pie has been in my oven for only about 20 minutes. That's all the cooking time it really takes in that 375 to 400 degree oven. As you can see, the cheese on the top has gotten nice and browned. Oh my gosh, and it's time to go in. Now, the first piece of this is always a little bit more difficult than the others, so it might not be perfect. I'm gonna get under there if I can. Let's see what I got. Oh yeah, man, that looks good. I gotta show you. Look at that. deliciousness. I mean, all that meat, beef and lamb and veggies, creamy mashed potatoes with just a little bit of butter. I got a taste. I got my salt and pepper here on the side for seasoning, but pretty sure it's because we seasoned every layer of this. Should be good to go. It's hot. Oh, come on. That is so good. You can taste all those herbs in there. And my gosh, the seasoning's perfect. And I love that there's texture. There's texture from the lamb pieces that are in there, as well as those vegetables. That just makes it just not all mushy like some shepherd's pies that I've had have been. I hope that you will try this recipe. I think you're gonna love it. Again, it's Shepherd Lives in a Cottage Pie. You can make it shepherd's pie or cottage pie. This is my combination of the two. And I think it's worth every second of the prep time that it takes to make this dish. So thank you for joining me on Bradley the Singing Chef. Please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, like and share those videos. Would love to share this recipe not only with you, but with those you love. And as always, eat well. Love always.